Today on Energy Contact, your unseen spirit and emotions, your soul, your feelings, are made up of just a very few, very simple, and very physical building blocks, stacked up in a bunch of different configurations. And that's all it is that makes you look the way you look, act the way you act, and feel the way you feel. And once you become aware of them, you can be empowered to look, act, and feel in healthier ways. Want to know more? Well, I hope you feel like looking at your television set for the next few minutes, because it's coming up right now on Energy Contact.
I'm gonna drive away all these doubts I've been keeping and doubt. Keep my mind on better things. He ain't gonna worry and I ain't gonna complain. I'm gonna drive away all these doubts I've been keeping and doubt. Keep my mind on better things. Just keep my mind on better things.
Hello, and welcome to Energy Contact. My name is Joseph Willenbrink. Thank you for joining me today, and thank you to the production staff here in the studio for helping me get my message out to you. Energy Contact is a series I'm presenting as a public service. It's about attaining perfect health, growth, self-improvement, happiness, and realizing your full potential. It's designed to present you a new way of seeing yourself and seeing the world around you. We're talking about things that have to do with making an energetic contact with that unseen world and your internal environment. There's no difference between the body, the mind, the spirit, the emotion. There's no difference between mass and energy. We love to separate and dissect and pull these things apart, but there's no difference. And so all that health and happiness actually comes when we start putting that stuff together, when we make that energetic contact. We're presenting on this program a brand new paradigm that is thousands of years old. We're presenting extraordinary topics for ordinary people. Let's move right ahead with that, and let's put up our first slide. Everyone please know that I am not a doctor, and this show is in no way a medical show. If you're looking for medical advice, you're in the wrong place. I might call myself an energy healer or a chakra healer, so might you. A lot of people call me lots of things, but state, federal, and local governments call me no such thing at all. It's important to know that. There's important information on this slide too, so we'll leave it up for a second and let you look at it. Please read it with all awareness. And when you've got it down, if you will, please locate a pencil and paper. Here's why. At the end of this show, we're going to run some credits, and on those credits is going to be contact information for me. I invite and encourage you to contact me, but in order to contact me, you're going to need that contact information. And in order to get the contact information, you're going to need a pencil and paper. There will be plenty of time at the end of the show to get all that stuff down. There just won't be time to get up and start looking for your pencil. So please do that now. All right, let's come back up here. Today's show is show number 35. If you're joining me for the first time today, thanks and welcome. I think you'll enjoy the show. These shows are sequential, they do build, so there's some ramp up time, some up to speed time that you will have missed out on. But I'm doing my very best to make these shows have great value on a standalone basis too. If it is your first time, or one of your first times, and if what you see piques your interest, I will invite and encourage you to look for previous shows airing at later times. They'll be back on, either here in this neighborhood or perhaps in the different cable areas where your friends live. Alrighty, and now it's the point of my show where I introduce my co-star, the brains of this outfit. This is the part of the show where we bring Slim up. Let's get Slim on camera here. There he is. Since we're investigating what it is that energy contacts in the physical self, we need to know a couple of things, don't we? We need to know something about our energetic self. And this show certainly is about energy. But that energy out there somewhere does us no good at all until we understand the physical thing that the energy contacts. And Slim here is here to help us do just that. Remember, a body without energy is just a corpse. Energy without a body, it might be a number of cool things, but none of them are human. All right, let's move ahead. Previously on Energy Contact, we have been discussing the body intellect and the anatomy that it builds. We've been talking about how the same things in your self that give you thought, memory, logic, recall, reason, all of those things, we think of them as exclusively territory up here in our skulls. But we're learning that it's not true, that those are in fact in every cell of us, that our thought creates anatomy, and that our body intellect is indeed building us. We've seen over the past several shows that we have two brains, that we have a second separate, completely independent brain, and that we have a parallel nervous system too. Neither of which did the best scientific minds in the world know anything about, until about 1970 or so. Old yogis and old mystics, some of them quasi-illiterate, have known about it for centuries, by the way. We have learned that we are all composed of completely identical atoms. We've learned that we have internal forces that animate us and external forces that operate on us, push us around a little bit. And that somehow all these things, if we can look at them just right, they are able to tell us something about ourself, something about our mind. Our mind, which is vastly different than either of our brains or either of our nervous systems. We've spoken as well just a little bit about this mysterious energy that those old yogis and those old mystics called Kundalini energy. Well, today we are continuing to look at the huge differences between the brain and the mind, those things that we have always thought are the same thing. We're looking as well at the differences and at some of the similarities between our minds and our nervous system. What does this all have to do with the internal forces that animate us? What does it have to do with our understanding of the difference between the real and the unreal? What does it have to do with the fact that a billion different people made out of the exact same materials look, act, and feel a billion different ways? Physically, mentally, spiritually, emotionally, otherwise. We're moving into a new understanding. We're moving past that idea of a centralized computer brain and this electrical wired nervous system to a unified network system, where it will be more and more obvious to you that there is absolutely no difference between the body, the mind, the spirit, the emotion, the intellect, and the ego. This will eventually lead us back to the concept of Kundalini energy, which then will lead us to other places still. But today, particularly, we're going to see what this bottle, this string of beads, the huge solar system, and a tiny little atom all have in common. We've got some dry technical stuff to muddle through today, but by the end of today's show, if you stick with me, you will have a firm picture of the things that are going on with you physically that create you energetically, and vice versa, all at the much more invisible than microscopic level. But first, everybody take a big breath, sit back and relax, because now is the time in our show where we're going to take our virtual field trip. We're going to visualize, as we do every show at this time. And today, we are going to imagine that you are incredibly musically gifted, a virtuoso, a mega prodigy. And though you are that, some people are going to come up to you today with a challenge. What they are going to want you to do is write a library of beautiful music, the entire library, in fact. They are going to want you to rewrite every piece of music that's ever been written, plus throw in a few songs of your own. Millions of pieces of music, symphonies like Mozart, rock like Lennon and McCartney, jazz, hip-hop, country, heavy metal, everything. And you can do it too. You're up to it. You've got the talent and you've got the speed. But then they sort of complicate things a little bit, and they tell you that you have to do it all with only 14 notes. And you think, all of the billions of pieces of music ever created? 14 notes? Is it possible? As you begin, though, you realize that you do have resources at your disposal. You've got thousands of different instruments. You got cellos and violins, didgeridoos, electric guitars, drums, xylophones, clarinets, you name it. And you realize that even though it's only 14 notes, you've got cool things like octaves and harmonics, things like that. And so all of a sudden, you begin composing and you realize, hey, this isn't hard at all. This is a piece of cake. And you are creating masterpiece after masterpiece, things that you would never have been able to dream you'd be able to create with only 14 notes. Well, there's a punchline to today's visualization. The fact is that there are only 14 notes in the entire Western chromatic musical scale. You musicians were ahead of me on that. Every song you've ever heard was composed of 14 different notes. How can millions of diverse songs and symphonies and you name it be made out of 14 notes? It almost defies reason, doesn't it? Well, hold that thought. Over the past few shows, we've reviewed the brain, The brain, the spinal cord, the nervous system. We've looked at the old model of the nervous system, the one they've taught forever in schools, they're still teaching, and a new model. And this new model reflects the scientific discoveries of the 1970s. Yep, that recent. But remember, it's only the discoveries that are recent. What's been going on has been going on all along. Over the past few shows, we've looked at both the traditional model and the new model with some detail and some slides. We don't have time to show you all of that today. We've gone over it a bunch though, and if you're interested, I encourage you to look for the few earlier editions of this show when they come back on, and you can learn all about it. What we do want to do today though is to discover what are the physical building blocks of all this stuff, of all your unseen and in fact unseeable spiritual, emotional, energetic self. We know that most of what's going on in the nervous system is far, far different than that old touch a thorn and react and reflex business. On the contrary, scientists have shown that emotional and the spiritual events within us fix to something physical. Let me restate that because it's crucially important. Scientific minds, these are not the alternative folks, scientists have proven that unseen things, moods, emotions, beliefs, do not occur until and unless they attach themselves as a physical thing to a physical thing. Whatever could that mean? Well, these scientists observed things called ligands and receptors, which interact in us. And those ligand-receptor interactions, they change us. They make us move, act, react, think, everything. And most importantly, perhaps, they make us feel. They make us feel in every sense of the word. All this is going on quite tangibly and anatomically in you and I right now at the rate of millions of reactions per second all over our bodies. All right, that's where we're headed. First, let's review a little chemistry and physics. Ligands and receptors. These are things that are the composers of our thoughts and feelings. They're sort of like our internal Beethovens, But they're only molecules. And molecules are basically just clumps of atoms. And atoms of the same type are exactly the same. What does that mean? Well, it means that you are mostly carbons and hydrogens. Gasoline, powerful, toxic, and flammable, doesn't look much like you and I at all, does it? It is composed of mostly carbons and hydrogens. The carbon atom in you is exactly the same as the carbon atom in a tank of gasoline. It's exactly the same as every other carbon atom everywhere. The one in a diamond, the one in a piece of charcoal, the one on the moon, one on the planet Xeon, just everywhere. They're all exactly the same, completely interchangeable. So what makes you different than a moon rock? Or what makes you different than a puddle of gasoline? Or hundreds of other examples of hundreds of other everyday items I could conjure up, Does gasoline have a soul? Well, why not? Why doesn't it think? Why doesn't it have moods? Well, let's bring up a slide, and we're going to investigate that a little bit. This here is a picture of an atom. Those little lines around there, those circular lines, they're not real. They just sort of show where those dots on the lines are going. They plot the orbit, if you will. Remember, we have seen that there are 7,000 trillion, let me restate that, 7 billion atoms in the human body, in one human body. So this atom here is about the most infinitesimally small thing that you can imagine. Now let's move forward. We'll look at something else here. We'll see on the next, there is the solar system. It's huge. It is about the most infinitely large thing that your mind can fathom. Those lines there, they're not really there either. They're just models to show you where the planets have been and where they're going, and where they'll come back if you give them a little time. All right, let's move forward one more time, and we'll put this all together. Look at that picture. It's fascinating. Do you notice that these two things look about exactly the same? There's an implication there that cosmic things are going on in you at submicroscopic levels, that it's the same model. That solar system over there, what is it that keeps Jupiter from veering off and bumping into Saturn? What could it be? Is it science or is it magic? Well, whatever it is, it's the same thing that operates you, me, your toaster oven, your stereo. It's all the same. There is no difference between energy and energy. All right, let's come back up here. So, here we are. There's 7 billion atoms in you alone, and another 7 billion in me. But there are only just over 100 different types of atoms, and less than half of those are common. So, let's take that information and recall that you and I are anatomically the same. And yet 1 billion different people, composed of essentially the exact same atomic composition, look, act, and feel 1 billion different ways. Okay, so now we're going to bring up our next slide, and I'm going to show you a portrait of yourself, a portrait of you and me. Let's bring that up. There we are. You and I are primarily made up of this stuff, well over 99% of us. So, in the musical composition that is you and me, there's basically 3 different notes: carbon, hydrogen, and oxygen. That's it. And so, these primary building blocks of you and I are exactly the same. Well, what makes us all different? Well, it is simply the arrangement of these atoms. All right, let's come back up here. And atoms, just like musical notes, are arranged in strings and chains and cycles and clusters, all sorts of shapes and combinations and contortions. Cool. But we still have a few basic notes and building blocks to discover. We started off talking about receptors. Where are those things? Well, let's get to those. Receptors are molecules, big specialized proteins. I'm going to pull one up here. Let's take a moment and we'll look at a protein. This is my protein here. And you can see it, my string of beads. It is very much like a protein, and I'm moving it around on purpose because this is exactly what proteins are doing in your body. They wiggle and dance around like this. You can think of each of those beads there as a little atom, or better, as a little amino acid, which we will explain in a second. All right, so proteins are big long chains like that. They dance around, and they are huge compared to a single atom. They're made of hundreds and hundreds of them, but yet they are small enough so that there are thousands of these guys on every nerve cell in your body. Remember, a nerve cell is a neuron. And your body has billions of these neurons. So do the math. These receptors are sensors. They're receiver of information. Just the same way that your ears are designed to detect and discern sounds, and your nose to detect and discern scents, these receptors are designed to take in and process and parse and interpret information. Meanwhile, we've got these things called ligands floating by. Well, what are they? Ligands are our molecules of feeling, of emotion, of spirit. but they're just molecules, and they're nothing until they fix to the proper receptor. Endorphin is a ligand. I could take a glass of it and pour it on this table here, and it won't do anything. The same thing that gives you bliss and the same thing that gives runners that runner high. It's nothing until it finds and fixes on the right receptor. When it does, what it does is it sort of slips into that receptor like a key slips into a keyhole, and it unlocks something in there. And that's when we say it fixes or occupies that receptor. And when this occupation commences, snap, information enters that receptor. And when that information enters, it goes down into the core of the cell. And then it goes from the core of that cell down to the core of you. And it changes you. And this is what creates spirit and mood and feeling. Slight digression, this is precisely what drugs do. Most prescription drugs, and a lot of street drugs, they're basically either they contain ligands or they create them in your body, and then they just find the receptor molecule thereafter and they open it and occupy it. And you're the laboratory rat. Congratulations. All right, let's get back to the reaction here. It begins to explain how one day, the way these ligands and receptors interact, how one day you can just take all sorts of pains and aggravations in Mother Teresa-like stride. You're like Gandhi. And then the very next day, the slightest little thing just sets you off. It explains why this movie makes you cry, why that person over there turns you on. It explains why some people get addicted to drugs and other people have to inject insulin. It explains everything. It explains every unseen thing that happens in you. But now we want to understand what those ligands are composed of. So I'm going to bring back my protein molecule here. A receptor is a protein, remember. These protein molecules are made of something. They are made of intermediates. We're going to look at the intermediate in a second. We've shown you a portrait of yourself, and we've shown you the model of receptor. Now we're going to take a look at your emotional and spiritual self. Here it is. This is a bottle of an all-natural nutritional flavoring substance. Since this is a public service program, I've blocked out the name. There's no endorsements here. But I'm showing you this bottle for a reason. You know what's in here? Your emotions are in here. You don't believe me? On this ingredient list, we see, this product contains 16 essential amino acids. I'll spare you the reading of them, but they're all listed right there. I could read them to you. Remember, we said that all the music in the universe is composed of 14 notes. Well, here in this jar, there's 16 amino acids, and all of those ligands and receptors are composed of those things. Actually, there's a total of about 20 notes in the amino acid bottle. And really, I guess, if we think of atoms as notes, we can think of those amino acids maybe as chords. But these are, in effect, these amino acids, these are the basic building blocks of both peptides and proteins. Peptides. I snuck another word on you. Ligands are peptides. Neuropeptides, to be exact. The word neuro just means something of the nervous system. And we'll find that that's technically incorrect, really. They're not just that. We'll look at that later. But they're referred to as neuropeptides. Both peptides and proteins, and therefore both ligands and receptors, are strings of amino acids. That's all they are. The same amino acids that are in my little bottle here. Peptides are a little shorter. So if the proteins are symphonies, those peptides, well, they're songs. A peptide can be as small as 2 amino acids. That's what NutraSweet is. It's a dipeptide. Or it can be a long, complicated chain, like insulin, pretty complex, but still much smaller than a protein. So you can picture it building up. There's amino acids, then there's peptides, ligands, and then there's proteins, receptors. Amino acids are the building blocks of all of this. And those 20 different chords can combine in billions and billions of different ways. Anybody that's ever tried to match just 6 numbers out of 50, whatever there are, in the lotto, understands that things can get complicated pretty quick and that there are lots of different possibilities. Which, by the way, has something to do with entropy, with the fact that there's a million different ways things can fall apart and only 1 or 2 ways that you can put them together. But let's don't go to entropy, at least not just yet. Receptors are always in us. They live on us. They're always in place. Jesus and Gandhi had as many aggressive, angry receptors as you and I have. So what's the difference between them and us? Well, we make the ligands as we go. If we make happy ligands, they find happy receptors, and we're happy. If we make angry ligands, they find angry receptors, and we're angry. If we make sick ligands, depressed ones, spiteful ones, fearful ones, forgiving ones, loving ones, you get the idea. So what? What does it all mean? What does it have to do with your health and self-improvement? Well, it means that whatever you are doing with your emotions are creating ligands. And whatever you are doing with those ligands is creating emotions. It means that when you work yourself up into a frenzy, you are actually meditating upon and creating anxious ligands. And they occupy anxious receptors. It means if you can take some time and really meditate and still your mind, you are creating peaceful, powerful ligands. And they make you more peaceful. And they are in fact retarding the creation of those pathetic, angry, selfish ones. All right, so you can change it. You hear people say, oh, I just can't help it. Well, you can help it. And when you do, you'll live a longer and happier and healthier life. Or you can just stay the way you are, and you can get your ligands from the pill bottle at the prescription store. But there's going to be side effects to that. And you're going to pay a lot more than your prescription copay. It means one more thing. It means that you are creating your mind right now. And once you know that, you can create that mind the way you want to. Every cell in your body is an independent, individual entity. And they are all your mind. It's not up here. And you have the control over what it's doing. If your body is your mind, then those ligands receptors, they are your subconscious mind. And again, you have the power to create them how you want. Thank you. I wish you peace and positive energy and a healthy life and energy contact.